Today we're going to change out a door. Now, before we start pulling the casing off and the door jamb out of the opening, one of the things we want to pay close attention to is that this particular frame and trim has been on for a good 60 years. That means there's a lot of layers of paint on here. Now, if we just start pulling it off, we're going to pull back on the painted area here and damage more of the wall surface than what we really want to do. So what we're going to do is take a razor knife and we're going to make scores along the edge here. Don't be afraid to make a couple of them. And we'll do that as well over here too, along this wall. We're also going to want to do the top and on the other side of the doorway too. Now another little hint here that you want to learn is that you don't want to pry from here, because what you're going to do, unless you put a board here, you're going to damage your drywall. Now we already know we're taking the jamb out and the casing, so it's better to pop it from this side because you don't run the risk of damaging your wall. Take it off a little bit at a time. Don't try to take it all apart. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut loose these metal clips. Okay, now that we've cut them loose, all we have to do is pull jamb free. Give it a little lift up like that. Give it a little pull like that. And there you go. Okay, now that we've pulled out the door jamb, there's cleanup work that has to be done before we can actually start setting the new door. If I wanted to get closer to this stud, this piece of wood is going to prevent me from doing it. We're going to take our knife and cut this back so that the drywall is flush with the stud. And that way when we go to lay this door jamb up into here and we start shimming, we don't have things in the way to keep it from getting plumb. The first thing I notice here is that there's a buildup of wood here, and that's from over the years of them sanding the floor, and they weren't able to sand underneath the door jamb, and it's on here like that, and also on the other side as well. So what we're going to use is a sander to take that down smooth and flush. Okay, now that we've got the floor smoothed out and flush with the new sanded floor area, we have to check this floor for level, along with checking this side right here as well. So I'm going to lay the level down on here. This house is old, and so it's settled quite a bit. Now what you're going to see from the bubble here, you can see that the floor is no longer level. And so let's just see how much we actually have to pick it up in order to get it level again. Alright, right there is level. Now that we determined that the level mark is right here, let's take a trim gauge and capture this distance right here and lock it in on the gauge. That distance needs to be taken off of the door jamb on this side so that when it rests on the floor here, it'll touch the floor here. We're going to take that measurement that we captured earlier, and now we're going to transfer it over to our jamb. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to get ready to set the door into the opening. But before I do that, I want to check this jamb side here, which is the hinge side of the door, and I want to see just where it's at in regards to being plumb. Now it's out of plumb, and it looks as though I'm going to have to pull it out about that far in order to get this thing to sit plumb. A couple schools of thoughts here. Some people might say have the door follow the existing wall that's in place already. I'm not going to do that. I like my doors to be plumb, and so what we're going to do is we're going to set this shim up. Now you'll notice the blue tape marks on my level. Now what I've done is I've transferred the hinge locations on the door onto my level so I know exactly where to shim at. And there we go. We're just going to nail the shims in place up here. We could just set the door into the opening as I mentioned earlier, but this works well. Okay, let's take another set of shims and let's push this in until it hits flush with the level. And there we go. And let's pop a couple more nails into it. And let's get the bottom. Okay, another reason why I do this is that because now I can come through here and get these shims out of the way. Because this side, it's really hard to get them because the casing is going to be right up against the wall. Okay, now we have the shims in place. They're located where the hinges are on the door, pre-hung door. So now we're just going to set it into the opening. Now we have the door sitting into the opening. Now, if this was a stained job, meaning the jamb and the casing were stained, I might go through the pains of popping off the doorstop and nailing in that area. But because we're painting it, it's going to be okay for us just to fire some nails into here. Again, at your shim line. I'm using a 2.5 inch nail, and I've popped in 2 nails up at the hinge to hold the door in place. Now, before I get going and nailing too much, let's check a couple things. First thing I want to draw your attention to is here. You'll notice that the door is hanging a little bit here right now, like overlapping the edge of the drywall. If I were to continue to push it back like that, there'd be a spring in the hinge. So before we even get going here, let's just move this thing a little bit so that it comes in. See, now what I've done is I've pulled it a little bit more. You can use a pry bar if it's too much. But now I've got it a little bit more respectable in line with the drywall. So let's close the door and let's just take a look. Now you notice the line going all the way across here. The reveal is the same. And it looks as though we could probably pull it a little bit. I can see that on the wall itself. There we go. Let's fire a nail here. I was able to shoot right at the hinge lines because we've already got shim behind it. So right now this door is sitting perfectly plumb where we need it to go. Okay, now we're ready to shim the other side. We call this the strike side of the door. And you're going to want to get shims located in several key parts of the door opening here. One, we're obviously going to want to have one up here. I always shim at the strike, and one at the bottom. That's the bare minimum. It's nice to get one in this field here, and perhaps down here. It just depends on how bad the door jamb is. Sometimes these jambs come out and they're really warped. This one's not looking too bad. So let's start up at the top, and let's put a shim in up here. Let's check that out. Okay, before we actually nail this shim to my left here in place, we want to check this line here and make sure that we're getting a good reveal as well down here. If you see a closed area, then that could present a problem for you. Now, this one's not too bad. I'm going to snug it up just a little bit, and by doing so, it's going to push it back. You don't want to push it too much because then it'll rub up here. So I like that. I'm just going to take my gauge here and make sure that we're sitting kind of flush with the drywall as well. And we're going to fire in 2 nails.